Have you made any observations about why we might need to think differently about perspectives on AI and what AI ethics means around the world, and not just focus on a universal approach to AI ethics? So, Christian, we can start with you. I have your, if you need to move your slides here. Is that it?
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, hello. Good evening. Today it's fantastic to be here. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you indulge me, I will start with a story. So I want to frame the discussion so that you understand how I approach AI ethics and AI regulation from the standpoint of the global south, or particularly from Latin America and Brazil. So can you go? And the story is about, it starts about this man, Arthur. He's just a kid. And during the pandemic, he, as many kids around the world, had to study at home. But he didn't have any internet connection at home. He only had one cell phone, and then mobile connection was really bad. So he very ingeniously walked 5 miles, climbed up the tree, and made his classroom the tree. Because that we had very good connection. Why I'm talking about connection, why I'm talking about infrastructure? Because when we discuss AI, we have to discuss what it is in our countries, in our local situations, how we will apply AI. So imagine if the principals want to close the gap of education in Brazil, and they decided, well, the best way to go about it is have a tutor. So a tutor for each kid. Is it possible? Obviously not. We do not have resources for a tutor for each kid, but we only might have AI tutor for each kid. Obviously, there is a lot of AI ethics implication here and a lot of risks that we have to discuss. But at the same time, as Professor Ludwig put very, very well, we do have an opportunity here of innovation, of how to move forward with AI in this case. And I want to create a little bit of an atmosphere for you to discuss why we have to look at AI regulation and AI ethics in a different perspective. So we do not have to look at only the actual harms and the actual risks. We do have to look at that, but there has to be two different pillars. Can you move? We have to look at two different pillars of AI. We have to look about AI ethics and AI regulation in terms of obviously managing and governing, as Professor Lütke as well put it very well, the risks and harms that have to do it. But there's a second pillar, a pillar of how we look at AI for not only in terms of this in terms of these risks and these harms, but also in these opportunities, or as I would put, another type of harms, another types of risks, which is geopolitical and in terms of societal risks. Imagine from the standpoint of Brazil, imagine what it would be the difference between having AI for laborers in Brazil or not having. What will be the difference in optimization, efficacy, and future? That's why I propose to you to look at this idea of regulating AI on two pillars. One pillar is regulating on AI, which is basically looking at the harms and risks. And the second one is regulating for AI. So look at this in terms of a stick and a carrot. And I can explain a little bit more in the future, but just to give you a little bit of a hint, in Brazil, as Professor Ludwig was saying, there is a big push towards regulation. But this push is looking at basically only one of those two pillars, basically looking on the harms and risks. And this is a very important way to think when you look at the globalization of AI, to think that if Brazil only looks at the harms, it to go in the same direction as the SMEs in Germany and think it will not harness innovation, it will actually hinder innovation. So think about when you look about ethics of AI and think about regulating and governing AI under these two main pillars, regulation on and regulation for AI. That's the logic I want to put, basically framing the work, and think about Arthur. In the end, what he needs, it's good, responsible AI. So think about not only in the stick, but also in the carrot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like, Pat, you can go right down the row here to Makoto and tell us a little bit about your perspective coming from Japan on these topics we're talking about.
First of all, I want to say I'm very happy to be here, and I thank Christoph for his kind invitation. And let me begin with the very brief description of the Japanese situation in terms of the AI use and the possible use. In recent years, particularly, Japanese people have the strong tendency to be concerned about privacy. So then, against such background, more and more people have the strong interest in the question of how to regulate the violation of privacy in the context of the big data collection and analysis. And so more and more researchers have described and study the EU's GDPR. And I think so such a tendency is very understandable given the characteristics of the Japanese societies. But at the same time, I think that what is missing in Japanese society in terms of the research about the AI development is the more context sensitive study. So let me give you one concrete example. Recently, Japanese people are very sensitive towards their health and diet. So an increasing number of people have used the AI-powered software that give advice about nutrition or food. So what you should eat today, given your preferences and given your health condition. So actually, this is the growing industry in Japan, but at the same time, we should look at some risk implied such the development of this industry. Let's imagine that one provider of this AI-powered software giving the nutrition advice has a special contract with the healthy food providers. And then this software can give advice in order to promote specific commodities provided the particular companies. So in such a way, such software companies can manipulate consumers in a very subtle way. I mean, the software is originally intended for the promotion of the health of the general public. But nonetheless, if a company finds some business chances in such context, and then manipulation is possible. Of course, this is just a possibility, but we can see some business ethics issues surrounding such a situation. And I think such a different context in different societies should be more closely looked at. And so I believe that, of course, we need the universal principles such as the transparency or the privacy protection and many others. But at the same time, we should develop the researches on the social context sensitive issues. And I hope this conference is the important step towards the study, both on the general principles and society particular issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we already have two really, different examples. I mean, we're seeing different things in terms of prioritization, in terms of context and where tools could be used and how we might have to think about actually employing them, moving them out of the research place into actual implementation. We'll move from Asia to a unique but very important player on the African continent, South Africa, and what kind of is the discourse there on this topic right now?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the fact that South Africa is unique. In some ways, it is unique. So I'm mostly speaking in the South African context, but some of it applies to the rest of the African context. So I think in South Africa and probably in a lot of Africa, AI ethics is not a matter of discussion as much as elsewhere. Recently, especially with the advent of ChatGPT and generative AI, it's become more mainstream. So I've suddenly found myself on radio, for example, discussing AI, whereas before no one knew that there was such a field as AI ethics. So it's becoming more mainstream, but the interest and the push is coming from civil society and even corporates rather than the government. So at a governmental level in South Africa, there's very little by way of thinking about AI regulation. If anything, there is a assumption that any developments on the AI front will be good, beneficial, help span all sorts of divides and address social issues, where I'm not always convinced that AI will necessarily be able to do that. But there's very much either an absence of interest in AI from a regulatory front, or a buy into the hype. It's all progress, and all progress is good. And as an example from the corporate front, I actually find that there is a concern with a lack of regulation and guidance. So recently, we did a short course for a large corporation in South Africa on AI ethics. They asked for training in data and AI ethics because of a lack of regulation and policy from a governmental level. And they weren't sure what they wanted. Their brief was train these middle managers in AI and data ethics. And so we did the best we could, but so interesting in that regard is the business environment seems to struggle in terms of the lack of guidance, strategy, regulation, and so on. Just in terms of unique challenges, I think that we face. So you mentioned some that are similar in the Brazilian context. So there's a massive socio-economic divide in South Africa. So we have a sector of society that has access to technology, smartphones, the internet, all of the infrastructure required to make use of AI technology. And then you have a large sector of the population who have no such access, who don't even have basic internet access, who will not have access to smartphones or laptops, maybe even not electricity. And so, these are kind of almost a microcosm of the rest of the kind of difference in the world in terms of AI penetration and the potential of AI to benefit society. By the same token, those who do have access to the required infrastructure potentially find themselves quite vulnerable because of the lack of regulation at a governmental level. So we find a lot of international companies moving into the space, the African space, making use of the fact that there is a limit in terms of regulation. A recent example from Kenya was the much publicized example of the workers who had to train ChatGPT to be less toxic. That is not the only example. So there are many examples on the continent where workers who do have the skills and the ability to engage in data and AI work do so under less protected circumstances that they would have in other situations. So I think that is a major consideration. Inclusivity, I think, is a value that should be considered there. And then finally, just in terms of local values, so there is a discussion in the literature on the difference between European values or values relating to the global north versus what a more localized framework might look like. So there's a large focus on Ubuntu, which is a South African-based ethical system, which is much more concerned with communal harmony, or is also concerned with communal harmony, let's put it that way. So there is a discussion as to whether the kind of current international frameworks are too focused on autonomy, and whether they would be less of a focus on autonomy and privacy in the South African context if you were to regulate AI from a Ubuntu perspective. I'm not convinced that the approach would be that much different if you take Ubuntu into account, but I do think there would be a greater focus on broader societal, the broader societal impact of adopting AI systems.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think, I mean, certainly acknowledging South Africa's unique place in the continent in our work with the Responsible AI Network Africa, where we talk to a lot of people across the continent, a lot of these issues come up. And I think thinking about challenges of inclusion, of participation, of access are often, at this point at least, taking kind of priority on in the discussions as opposed to kind of moving into the regulatory. So I hope everyone's okay. We're moving a little bit into our coffee break because we started a little late, but I wanted to pass over to Christoph as well. Maybe bring it together, since we already talked about the EU perspective quite a bit, maybe thinking about how we can work more globally together. For instance, with maybe talk a little bit about our Global AI Ethics Consortium, which looks at academia, but how do we maybe bring companies and other players to think about a more kind of inclusive or global approach to AI governance?
Yeah, and this is exactly why I brought this middle way into it. I think we have seen successful examples of this kind of discussion. I remember in 2019, in the same year that the Institute was launched, before, there was a roundtable at the National Academy of Sciences, I think in Washington, with the players from around the world, all continents, both government players as well as industry ones and others, about this topic. That it was mostly ethics of AI at the time, but also moving already into some aspect of governance. And I think we need to continue this discussion. I mean, that we have it at such a high level as the G7 summit is already something. And I was also very surprised and also happy to see that this topic is that high on the agenda. And we will certainly not have a unified approach to this, at least not in the near future. I think we will have differences. But on the other hand, the question is, how large do these differences have to be? And we have to take into account competition. I mean, there is competition among the AI sectors in different parts of the globe. And we have AI industries in many parts. And we should seek to create an environment where the regulation, if we have it, is enabling and also geared towards innovation. If it's not doing that, then we have a problem, I think. And that's what I would like to avoid. I think this is in mutual interest. It cannot be in the interest of, and I've heard this argument, so that in the argument of lobbying for regulation in the other part of the world, so that they have the regulation, but in their own place there we have no regulation, and so are doing better in competition. So this is an argument that hopefully will not hold, and so that we, as I said, we have enabling regulation and governance, enabling for regulation, for innovation.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time again, but I want to give a last opportunity if anyone else has where they've seen kind of these global perspectives taken into account, or a way to kind of provide multiple value systems in approaches to AI governance. Not to put you on the spot, but if you have anything else to add in our last couple of minutes. Oh, Christian, yeah.
just because I find it fascinating, this idea of collective versus individual understandings of ethical aspects in terms of regulating AI. And I think this is a very important thing we have to bear in mind, particularly because we are talking about not only something that will affect people as individuals themselves, but it will affect societies and communities as a whole. And going back to the education example that I put forward in the beginning, talking about Arte, is all about understanding that AI is both, as Professor Lutke say, an enabler as well. So we think about harms, usually we think about individual harms, but they are collective harms that we have to be in mind. So when I talk about regulation on AI, regulation for AI, there's a big aspect of it that is about collective and understanding what it's going to go around the world. So thinking about how we're going to play AI in terms of capacity building, for instance, how the workers are going to be affected. Professor here talked about workers in Kenya. This is an interesting example of how AI has both, on the one hand, collective harm, but also in the other hand, can go collective prosperity to another extent, if you think about it in a more responsible way. So I think it's very interesting that we are all here together to think about this, not only in terms of individual ethics, but about collective ways of doing this. So this is my stand on that. Thank you.
Any last thoughts from either of you? No pressure. Good. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.